Welcome, guys. If you've never seen any of my stuff before, there's just all kinds of stuff we get into here on our little hobby farm, from cows to chickens, planting pasture, eventually making hay, building stuff, breaking stuff, buying broken stuff. We're going to go over this John Deere 2440 that I bought that had mechanical issues. In this case, the high-low unit was blown up in the tractor inside the transmission. So I bought this tractor off a guy at work that we knew we had mechanical problems with it. When I went and looked at the tractor the first time, it was split in half at the clutch. So the engine was separated from the clutch housing and the rear end of the tractor. So I knew it needed work. So I've also been looking for a 60 to 80 horsepower tractor to add here to the farm, because my little 43 horse four-wheel drive tractor just doesn't have the grunt it needs to pull my no-till drill in order to plant pastures and food plots and things like that. So, and actually I just blew the front end out of that tractor in the woods, doing some logging work and clearing some pasture in the woods and all that. So that was a deal on its own, getting bearings and gears and all that for that tractor. But that's all back together. So that's got front end loader on it. So it's a very helpful tractor, but I just needed something bigger like this tractor here for the grunt work, and also to power our WoodMax wood chipper, because that thing's got an 8-inch wood chipping capacity at 50 horse PTO, but my other tractor is only a 34 PTO horsepower tractor. So we worked for about an hour to get it bolted back together so we could get it pulled up on the trailer. And at this point in time, it's been sitting for about 18 months. So I get it home, and the first thing I do is go ahead and I split the tractor at the transmission behind the clutch housing. So this is the engine, and then there's a clutch housing that houses the transmission pump, the high-low unit, or reverser if it's a reverser tractor. I split all of that, and I pulled I pulled the high-low unit out of it, which is a clutch-driven planetary gear reduction pack. These tractors are known for, the early tractors are known for blowing up, and especially if you pull start them. And the manual clearly describes, don't pull start these tractors because you can damage clutch packs or completely grenade the planetaries. This is what happened to this. So I had some video of me actually splitting the tractor, but I've got a new phone since, and I think some of that got lost in the transition. So I've got some pictures of the tractor the day I pulled it home on a trailer, and a picture here in the shop. We've got the PTO clutch and the high-low planetary assembly and everything on the bench, and we go from there. So this is going to be a couple part series because I took quite a bit of video. The first is diagnosing the issue mechanically, which is, we know now, is a bad high-low, and then we go from there to the PTO clutch pack, and then, you know, sourcing parts and all of that. To the next series of videos is going to be transmission work. It's going to be transmission pump work, some hydraulics with the low pressure transmission pump, and the deletion of the hydraulic circuit for the high-low, since we delete the high-low out of this tractor. And then part 3 is probably going to be, you know, buttoning the tractor up, some troubleshooting with the high pressure pump, troubleshooting the rock shaft. If you guys want to follow along, there's not a whole lot out on these tractors on YouTube as far as working on them. It seems like a lot of it's because these tractors are kind of known as what I've seen as a tannerite tractor, that you ought to just blow the thing up. And Pandora's box tractors, they've been called a lot of things, so, which is interesting. But there's a guy on YouTube from Australia who has a YouTube channel called Bundy Bears Shed, and he documents going through 2030, which is very similar to this tractor as far as pulling the high-low out, pulling the PTO clutch out, rebuilding all of that, putting it all back together, And he obviously has been in these quite a bit. I don't know the parts situation down in Australia, but here in the US, these things are, as I was explained to by many shops, they are rarer than hen's teeth. And everybody, well, the last guy that I talked to was like, yep, I know where one's at, but you're going to pay for it. So enjoy the video as we go along and tear this thing apart and start to diagnose what's wrong with it, and we go from there. So
there's an Australian fellow that has a full tear down and rebuild of these on YouTube, which is awesome. So I just verified with that video that I can pull some of these bolts out in order to release this outer cage to be able to get the assembly split. So there's long bolts and there's short bolts. So these three here are the short bolts just for this cover, and then these three here are the long bolts for the rest of the unit. So we're gonna zip them off. Hoping be able to get her finagled through here, but it doesn't look like she's gonna. Well, enough of this finagling for now. Well, she's apart. So, I guess, unfortunately, I was right that the needle bearings came from one of the planetary gears. But there's a little ball bearing that sits in here, and when you push the pin in for the planetary pin, that ball protrudes and locks it in this housing. Then when you bolt the cover on, that keeps it in there. So that's not a big deal. That's normal. But yeah, this is definitely not normal. So she's completely smoked. I mean, there's no repairing that. That's part of the original casting. Part of the original casting there, and you know, your clutch plates are completely smoked. Okay, go up with you. So the bulging from the housing is done by that guy. So this housing's shot, obviously. And so these plates here, I mean, that's how they came out. They were stacked like that. There should be, to my knowledge, one of these guys between the two. Just like this guy. And then between him. Boy, it looks like somebody's been in here before, because that plate, so that clutch disc is different than this one? Or is that one just wore down enough? Look at your thicknesses differences here. But yeah, there they are. Okay, so you can see that's just an extremely wore out. So, you know, long story short, somebody's been in this before. They did not, they didn't restack it. I don't think they stacked it correctly. So, whether or not that attributed to it, I don't think so. I think the pull start is what did it. But so, because they're known for that, can't pull start these things. It says in the manual too. I was like looking around in the manual, and like, sure enough, you know, you would think that if it was that important, they'd like plastered it all over the dash or something, like do not pull start. But the fact that there isn't, that's really weird. So that core is not even worth rebuilding. So I'm gonna probably get nailed with a core charge too. But these are like $4,000. So I mean, I'm into the tractor for way less than that at this point, but I mean, it's still money ahead even at that, but still that's a tough one to swallow. It's hard to believe that just pull starting it will do that, but again, when you pull start it in a low gear, but that low gear means really high torque being brought from the opposite end through the tire, which the tire is huge, right? So that's a giant gear that's driving a planetary in the final drive that's then running up through the transmission and then through the transmission input shaft, which is directly coupled to this guy here. So there is a ton of torque applied to this sun gear. So this is the sun gear, and these are the planetaries, right? Because the planets revolve around the sun. So as the sun drive spins, right, it drives your planetaries, but there's a ton of torque being reverse flowed up through this planetary to then drive the engine to start it. So yeah, these things, that is not a very big unit, and hence them not liking to be pull started. So from here, the rear end cover has been unbolted where the rock shaft is, so we're going to pop that off. The gasket's been blown out here, so somebody's been in there before, so we're going to pop that off, make sure there's nothing in there damaged, get all this cleaned up, get the PTO clutch, probably take that apart and look at it, because if all of the filings and the fines that have been running through the oil are through the PTO clutch, then that's an issue too, especially the way all this milky stuff looks. So they don't make these units anymore, the high-low units, so they're all remans from parts that are out there. So anyways, now I get to start trying to locate parts. Well, welcome back here. We're continuing on with the 2440. So after trying to source parts for the high-low, I actually did source a high-low unit, a reman high-low unit with year warranty, was $5,750. That includes a $1,000 core charge for my parts, even though they're completely blown up. So needless to say, that's not going to happen. So I'm now converting this tractor over to a non-high-low tractor. So I'll just have the straight forward 8 and the 4 reverse. Not a big deal. I found clutches, I found the shafting that I need. Those are on the way. And then I've also ordered a clutch housing as the bore, PTO, and clutch shaft, transmission shaft, as they go through the front of the clutch housing. In a high-low unit, it's bored out larger to receive a bushing. Whereas a non-high-low unit tractor is a smaller bore to receive a needle bearing. So I found a non-high-low unit tractor clutch housing down in Florida, bought that, so that's on its way. So while I was in here, I pulled the clutch, and the clutch is in good shape. Surfaces look good, so the clutch is good. Went ahead and checked out the rear main. Rear main looks good. I don't think it's been too awful long since somebody's been in here, but hey, I'm this far, so I might as well pull 4 bolts on the flywheel and get it checked out. So at this time, the tractor is in 3 main pieces. So there's the front end with the engine. Down here is the clutch housing with the steering
shaft and everything on it. And then of course the rear end of the tractor. So the rear end of the tractor, when I pulled it apart, actually looks really good. I went ahead and flushed out all of this gunk down in here. There were needle bearings and metal shavings, all kinds of stuff. I'll throw a picture of the transmission pump pickup tube, because that thing was insanely plugged with all kinds of stuff. But and we also looked down in here, and I flushed all this out with diesel fuel, so there's a little diesel left in the oil cup here. There was a little E-clip in the oil cup that came from somewhere, and ended up finding out it came from up underneath the rock shaft cover. So thankfully we found where that went, put that back in. At this point in time, I'm just tightening everything up. I'm gonna go ahead and put the flywheel back on, reassemble the clutch. Again, this is all done. Probably gonna leave that off. That way I can mess with the shafting when I go ahead and put the tractor back together for ease of reassembly. And then I'm probably gonna strip the clutch housing here, get the steering off of it and all of that. The PTO clutch, I pulled it and inspected the plates. Okay, so there's a friction plate, but that's a really worn one, even though you can't really tell. There's no grid pattern left on the friction material. But then when you flip it over, there is no friction material left on this side. So there's 10 of these. So I went ahead and ordered 10 of them. They're here, but we're gonna wait for, I've got a washer and a new clip that will go in there to hold the spring tension for the clutch pack. So yeah, we're basically converting this thing from a high-low tractor to a non-high-low tractor. It's kind of a big job, probably. Oh, I'm gonna have, let's see, so the clutch housing was $250, but then it was $250 to ship it. For me to pick it up at a terminal, it would have been $500 to drop ship it to my house. So I got $500 in clutch housing. This is your transmission shaft that goes from the friction plate of the clutch all the way back to the transmission input shaft. That shaft right there is $450. So let's call that $500. The PTO shaft is another $250. So there's $1,250 plus $500. So I'm at like $1,800 in parts to convert this over to a non-high-low tractor versus $4,750, call it $5,000 by the time I get, plus some other things. So yeah, so it'll be a lot cheaper in the long run. Plus, if the high-low ends up blowing up in 4 or 5 years, then guess what? I've got to do this anyways, because I'm not going to put another $5 grand in a high-low if they keep blowing up, which these tractors were very well known for. Yeah, so the other thing with this tractor is, even though it sat for about 1.5 years, once it was liquid tight and mechanically sound, that way it wouldn't come apart on me when I started it up, I went ahead and I rigged it up with a jump pack and started cranking. And third crank it fired off, actually. So it was, man, that was after I changed the fuel filter. Of course, I primed everything real well. I didn't have to crack injector lines, anything like that. But I jumped the post on the starter and, fired right off. 2.5, 3 cranks. She fired off, started running, and yeah, the engine seems very strong with this tractor. So I've done an engine service on this filter. It's got new 1540 Rotella T6 full synthetic in it. New diesel filter, transmission filters. I filtered the 10 gallons of oil that came out of it through a 1 micron sock filter because it did have some trash in the oil. But I filtered it through like a 150 micron screen first, and then I filtered it through a 1 micron sock. And yeah, the oil looks really, really good. So we're just going to run it with that. And after I get 10, 20 hours or so on the tractor, I'll go ahead and change the transmission filter again. Really, from this point on, all I really have to do is assemble all the fairings and all that. I got to do a little brake work because the brakes are spongy and they bleed off. So I've got to order some parts for the brake. We'll talk about that in a later video. And then the tires are loaded with calcium chloride and the tubes leak. So I'm going to pull those out. we're going to put new tubes in, non-loaded, and at a later time, I'm going to get some beet juice and load them up with beet juice, rim guard, whatever you want to call it, for ballast. But for the time being, we're just going to keep on plugging away at it and get her ready for fall planting. Some winter. So we're going to get it ready for fall planting some winter varieties of grains, some small grains, so we can run my old 1940s McCormick Deering combines in the spring to combine off a bunch of small grains for our chicken feed, because chicken feed is insanely expensive nowadays. So we're going to try and grow our own. So that's what we're going to be doing here. That's what the plan is. So, follow along, and hopefully we can put some videos out on a semi-monthly basis, I guess, to show you what we're doing here. So thanks for watching, guys.